For years, Matthew McConaughey was the symbol of charm, success, and effortless cool, the golden-haired Texan who turned every line into a legend. All right. He had it all. Fame, fortune, and the freedom that comes with both. But behind the easy grin was a man growing restless. The fame that once thrilled him had begun to feel empty. The Hollywood lights he once chased now blinded him. And so, in his 50s, McConaughey did something few actors dare to do. He walked away. The decision shocked fans. Directors called. Studios begged. But Matthew said no. He wasn't retiring out of defeat. He was searching for something deeper. This is not a story about illness or scandal. It's about awakening, about a man who looked at the glittering world he'd built and asked, what really matters? What followed was one of the most emotional transformations in modern Hollywood. The story of a man who chose family, faith, and purpose over fame. This is the truth behind Matthew McConaughey's quiet goodbye, and how it changed him forever. Before the fame, before the Oscars, and long before his face became a symbol of cool, Matthew McConaughey was just a small-town kid from Uvalde, Texas, the youngest of 3 brothers, raised in a blue-collar family that valued hard work and heart above all else. His father, Jim, was a former football player turned oil pipe salesman, rough-edged, but deeply proud. His mother, Kay, was a schoolteacher with a sharp wit and endless optimism. Their marriage was passionate, messy, and real, the kind of love that fought hard and forgave harder. From that fire, Matthew learned 2 things, resilience and authenticity. As a teenager, he didn't dream of Hollywood. He dreamed of being a lawyer, maybe traveling, maybe settling down. But destiny had other plans. While studying at the University of Texas, a chance meeting with a producer changed everything. That meeting led to a small part in a 1993 coming-of-age film called Dazed and Confused. He only had a few lines, but those lines became immortal. All right. 3 simple words that would echo across decades. From there, everything changed. Within a few years, McConaughey became Hollywood's favorite leading man, charming, magnetic, the guy who could sell both a smile and a story. Roles in A Time to Kill, Contact, and Amistad turned him into a star. By the late 1990s, he wasn't just famous, he was everywhere. But fame is a double-edged sword. And for Matthew, the sharp side came faster than he expected. The roles got bigger, but they also got emptier. Hollywood saw his looks, his grin, his swagger, and decided that was all he was. One romantic comedy after another, one forgettable script after the next. He was making millions, but losing himself. Behind the scenes, McConaughey began to feel like a man trapped in a role that wasn't his own. He once admitted, "I was playing the same guy in every movie, just wearing different clothes." The public saw a carefree superstar. But inside he felt restless and increasingly hollow. Then came a moment that changed everything. Around 2009, after years of being typecast, McConaughey stopped saying yes. He turned down scripts. He disappeared from the spotlight. Hollywood thought he was finished, but he was just getting started. For nearly 2 years, Matthew went quiet. No interviews. No premieres. He stayed home in Texas with his wife, Camila Alves, and their young children. It was during that silence that he began to see what truly mattered: his family, his roots, and the man he wanted to be. When he finally returned to acting, it was with a different fire. His comeback wasn't loud. It was profound. Films like The Lincoln Lawyer, Mud, and Dallas Buyers Club showed a depth that stunned audiences. The man once dismissed as a rom-com actor became one of Hollywood's most respected performers. But the transformation wasn't just professional. It was personal, a spiritual reckoning. McConaughey had learned that success means nothing without purpose. He once said, "There's a difference between happiness and joy. Happiness is short-lived. Joy feeds your soul." And with that realization, Matthew McConaughey began a new chapter, one defined not by fame, but by meaning. Yet even as the world celebrated his comeback, few knew the silent battles he still faced. The weight of expectations, the struggle to balance family with fame, and the haunting question of what truly defines a life well lived. By the time Matthew McConaughey reached his early 40s, he had everything most actors dream of: Success, money, and a name that could headline any movie. Yet behind the charming grin and effortless confidence, something inside him had begun to fracture. He was surrounded by noise, flashing cameras, constant headlines, endless questions. But the louder the world got, the quieter his soul became. Every time he stepped onto a red carpet, every time a reporter asked about his next big role, he felt a part of himself slipping further away. Hollywood has a way of building you up and then boxing you in. For McConaughey, that box came in the form of romantic comedies, films that made millions but offered him nothing to grow from. He once said, "I was making movies that were fun, but they weren't feeding me." When he turned down a $14 million paycheck for another formulaic role, the industry was stunned. Some called it career suicide. Others called it madness. But for Matthew, it was freedom. For the first time, he stopped trying to please the world and started listening to himself. That decision came at a price. For nearly 2 years, the phone didn't ring. Studio executives stopped calling. The offers vanished. In interviews, he later described those years as both terrifying and sacred, a test of faith. "I didn't know what was next," he said, "but I knew what I wasn't going to do anymore." During that silence, McConaughey found peace in simplicity. He spent time with his wife Camilla and their children in Austin, far from the chaos of Los Angeles. He reconnected with nature, with God, and with the values that had guided him long before fame. He journaled daily, reflecting on what success really meant. He realized he didn't want to be the guy who was always on screen. He wanted to be the man his kids looked up to at home. Then, slowly, life began to shift again. His patience paid off. He started receiving scripts that spoke to his soul, darker, richer, and real. The Lincoln Lawyer, Mud, Killer Joe, and eventually Dallas Buyers Club became milestones in what he later called his McConaissance. But while the world celebrated his comeback, few knew the quiet torment he endured behind that rebirth. The industry that once doubted him now demanded more than ever. And fame, the same beast he'd tried to tame, returned, louder and hungrier than before. He was older now, wiser, but also more aware of how fleeting everything was. Losing friends, watching time pass, and feeling his priorities shift forced him to confront the truth. Fame was never meant to define him. As he accepted his Academy Award in 2014 for Dallas Buyers Club, he stood on stage and thanked God, his family, and his hero, himself, 10 years in the future. It wasn't arrogance. It was gratitude for the man he was still becoming. But that speech also marked a turning point. Behind the glow of success, McConaughey began to sense something deeper calling him, a pull away from Hollywood's glitter toward a quieter, more meaningful life. He'd climbed to the top, looked down, and realized the view wasn't what he'd imagined. The fame, the fortune, the applause, none of it compared to the peace he found in stillness, faith, and family. And that's when he made a choice that would once again shock the world. He would step away. Not out of defeat, but out of purpose. As the echoes of applause faded after his Oscar win, Matthew McConaughey found himself at a strange crossroads. The world saw a man at the peak of his career, adored, respected, untouchable. But behind the scenes, Matthew began feeling a pull in a very different direction. He had conquered Hollywood's highest mountain. Yet, as he stood at the summit, he realized there was nowhere left to climb that wouldn't cost him something deeper: his peace, his family, his sense of purpose. The fame, once thrilling, now felt heavy. Every interview, every photo shoot, every movie pitch began to feel like an echo of a life he no longer wanted. In his heart, he knew it was time to step back. So, in a move that left many stunned, McConaughey quietly began turning down major roles, not because he couldn't do them, but because he no longer needed to. He once said, "I didn't fall out of love with acting. I just fell more in love with living." He relocated fully to Texas, far from the chaos of Los Angeles. There, surrounded by open skies, rolling hills, and the steady rhythm of family life, he rediscovered the version of himself that fame had buried. Mornings were spent not in front of cameras, but on his porch with coffee, journaling his thoughts, watching the sun rise over the Austin horizon. He found joy in silence, in the laughter of his children, in the grounding presence of his wife, Camila. His retreat wasn't an escape, it was a return. He began teaching, mentoring, and speaking about purpose. At the University of Texas, he became a professor of film, guiding young storytellers not just on how to act, but how to live truthfully. His lectures weren't about fame or money, but about values, balance, humility, and the art of saying no. In interviews, he spoke more about gratitude than glamour. He talked about catching green lights, his term for life's moments of clarity, signs that guide us toward the right path, even when that path means slowing down. He said, sometimes, the best thing you can do for your future is to pause. Not stop, just pause long enough to see what really matters. The media began to speculate. Was he retiring? Was he burned out? But those who truly understood him knew that McConaughey was simply evolving. He wasn't walking away from acting. He was walking towards something more meaningful, a life defined by authenticity, not applause. And yet, even as he stepped out of the spotlight, Hollywood never really let him go. His calm presence, his wisdom, his southern drawl, they had become part of American culture itself. Directors still called. Studios still offered millions, but McConaughey became selective, only saying yes to projects that aligned with his soul. Films that told the truth, that honored life's deeper questions. When he wasn't on set, he was on the road, traveling, writing, speaking, and reflecting. His memoir, Green Lights, became a national sensation, not because it was about fame, but because it was about faith, resilience, and the lessons hidden in life's hardest seasons. Through it all, he remained grounded in gratitude. "I've learned," he said, "that success is not about what you have. It's about how you handle what you lose." And that's exactly what makes Matthew McConaughey's journey so rare. In a world obsessed with attention, he found strength in stepping away. He chose peace over popularity, faith over fame, but even in his quiet life, a new and deeply personal chapter was waiting. One that would test everything he'd learned about love, loss, and letting go. By his mid-50s, Matthew McConaughey had done what few stars ever manage. He'd stepped away from the blinding lights of Hollywood and found something far brighter within himself. But life, as it often does, wasn't done testing him. In the quiet of Texas, surrounded by the family he cherished, Matthew began to see life through a new lens. Fame had given him everything he once thought mattered: money, recognition, power. But it had also taken pieces of his soul. Now, with the noise gone, he finally heard what life had been whispering all along. That joy doesn't come from the spotlight, it comes from stillness. He often described this chapter of his life not as a retreat, but as a revelation. A moment when he realized that the roles he'd played on screen were nothing compared to the role he was meant to play off it. A father, a husband, and a man of faith. Then came a scare that brought that truth into painful clarity. In an interview, McConaughey spoke about a near miss, an unexpected health concern that forced him to stop and face his own mortality. He didn't go into detail, but the message was clear. Life is fragile, and every moment is borrowed time. For a man who once built his life around action, fame, and adrenaline, the realization hit hard. But it also brought peace. "I learned," he said softly, "that you can't control the wind, but you can adjust your sails." It was in that season of vulnerability that he began speaking more openly about faith. Not the kind found in headlines, but the quiet, personal kind, the one that steadies you when the cameras stop rolling. He found comfort in prayer, in nature, and in gratitude. His days became simpler. Walks with his children, late-night talks with Camila, handwritten notes instead of press releases. He once said, "I'm not chasing roles anymore. I'm chasing meaning." And meaning, it seems, has never been in short supply. When fans see him now, they don't just see a movie star. They see a man who has lived, lost, and learned. His wrinkles tell stories of laughter and lessons. His calm eyes reflect a peace few ever find. From Dazed and Confused to Dallas Buyers Club, from reckless youth to reflective teacher, Matthew McConaughey's journey has been less about fame and more about faith. Faith in himself, in family, and in the unseen rhythm of life. As he often says,
Life's not about how many times you fall.
it's about whether you learn something every time you do. Now, when he looks back at the chaos, the heartbreaks, and the triumphs, he doesn't see mistakes. He sees green lights, the moments that taught him to move forward, even through red lights and delays. He's not the man who once needed the world's approval. He's the man who found peace in his own truth. In one of his most heartfelt reflections, McConaughey wrote, "When you find your balance between ambition and gratitude, that's when you're really living." And maybe that's the revelation that changed everything. That true success isn't measured in fame, awards, or wealth, but in the quiet grace of being present. For Matthew McConaughey, the journey from Hollywood's brightest star to life's humble student is more than a story of reinvention. It's a reminder to us all, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say to the world isn't all right. All right, it's simply, I'm home.